everyone. Welcome back. So last week we focused in on the dissolution of my engagement, and I wanted to have maybe a more cheerful topic this week, and one that is still totally personally relevant, but a lot of fun. The topic is rebounds. When you end a major relationship, you get so much advice from friends. It's like, you gotta get back out there, or no, you're not ready for a relationship. Slow down. What are you doing? So what is the right thing to do? How do we help our friends? And what should we do when we end a relationship? So Kibby, how do we define a rebound?
Good question, Jacqueline. A rebound is just defined as a new relationship that follows a breakup of a significant relationship very close in time, which I think is kind of a stupid definition because, like, how close in time? You know, what's the nature of the significant relationship? What's the nature of the next relationship? I mean, isn't all relationships like coming after the last one?
Yeah.
So I think when we talk about it in, amongst our friends colloquially, it's a little bit like, it's almost kind of downplaying it, right? It's like dismissing the next relationship. You broke up with someone serious and then you jumped into something that was like a little bit more for the short-term benefit, right? Like someone to hook up with or just someone to help you feel better, pass the time, or it just kind of, I think when we say rebound, it's like, this is not a real relationship. This is just, this is like in the shadows of the last one. But, just like the pure definition is a relationship that comes pretty closely after the last one.
Right. So the rebound literature is not very populated, I would say.
Yeah.
And that's something that the papers talk about. And we found some really cool papers. So I'm actually really excited about this topic. But it was funny, one of them was talking about, they gave a definition of rebound that is kind of maybe more colloquially used, which is like a relationship that comes about 6 weeks after the dissolution of a relationship, where you're not totally over the last relationship and it's superficial in nature. But then this paper was exploring whether rebounds are good or bad, and it's like, well, using that definition, it's impossible because you're defining it as a naturally superficial thing,
right,
when you haven't had time to heal. And I think that speaks to how we often look at new relationships that come like directly after a breakup, but that's not necessarily the case. And the research showed actually a lot of benefits of rebounds.
Yeah, I think in general, I think it downplays the different roles that different relationships can have in your life, right? Like we really tend to treat the serious getting married and having kids as the real relationship, like the one, and that everything else is just, I don't know, practice until that. But at least in my experience, like, first of all, I didn't have just one, right? I just had I had a couple. I have one really serious one that I feel like is the one, but I feel like a lot of my other relationships, even ones that are, rebounds, played a really important role in my growth, in getting me ready for a family, the people that I really, really cared about. So, I don't know. I think I like to keep it a little bit more vague and a little bit more open-ended when it comes to thinking about rebounds. But I like how rebounds are thought of as either beneficial or can be destructive.
Yeah, and there's also... there's nothing to say here that rebounds have to be superficial or that they have to be short-lived. I mean, you had a rebound that turned into a marriage.
Yeah. Well, we'll go into this. Both of us have had interesting rebounds since our major breakups, but I had a rebound that didn't go well and a rebound that went really well. So,
So have I. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll talk about those.
So let's first talk about why people have rebounds. So there's this question of, do people rebound because they are still emotionally attached to their previous relationship? And the answer looks like, yeah, a lot of people do. And so one of the things that can happen is that they go into a new relationship to distract from the old relationship. And this appears to be particularly true for men. So we often think that if I were to ask people, who do you think is more distraught by a breakup. A lot of people might think women, because women are seen as more emotional, more relationally attached, but the answer is actually men. And the hypothesis as to why seems to be men are dependent on romantic relationships for much more of their emotional needs than women are. Women have other friends they can go to. Yeah, women have been practicing relational intimacy for a long time. They have been able to express their emotions. They've been able to talk about their emotions with friends. That's not looked down upon. Men, however, are pretty siloed to their romantic relationships, and it's not seen as particularly masculine to cry, to seek help from friends, to be, talking about their relationships a lot. And there's this interesting theory here that, women, and maybe because femininity is almost like looked down upon generally, that women are able to access both feminine behaviors and traits and masculine ones, whereas men are kind of limited to expressing themselves in a masculine way. And so men are not able to do things that are seen as feminine, such as, crying, seeking emotional support, talking about their relationships. And basically that really, really limits their coping mechanisms. And it leaves them with one primary one, which is distraction. And so they may seek a rebound in order to distract from the feelings. Or maybe even to say, okay, well, I got my emotional needs met in a relationship. Well, now, the only way I can do that now is to get a new relationship.
Yeah, I mean, this is where the lack of specificity over what a rebound is can be tough to do research on, because I would think that both men and women get into rebound relationships, but men might do it. I read something about how it's more about sex, right? It's about the short-term strategies and coping, like the distraction that you're talking about, like making you feel better with, just like hooking up, like short-term non-situationships and not serious things, whereas women might get into more serious, like long-term committed relationships in their rebounds. So, I mean, they're both rebounding, but just differently, right?
Yeah, and so just to add to that, the honeymoon period that comes with a new relationship may kind of supplant some of the distressing feelings and help kind of coast people into feeling better. So that might sound like suppression or just kind of putting a Band-Aid on the situation. But people have actually, research has actually found that people who started a new relationship quickly had higher well-being and a better opinion of themselves compared to those who waited longer to begin their subsequent relationship. Now, this might be because... we talked in the last episode about this fear of ambiguity. Like, okay, well, I can't break up because then am I ever going to find anything again? Am I ever going to be happy again? Well, when you have a rebound, it kind of tells yourself, oh, wait, there are options here. Like, I can date again. It's fine.
Yeah, so I could see how not just distraction, but also like boosting self-confidence and boosting self-esteem, and also like getting back your optimism for dating in the future, right? After you like lose something important that you might, you're losing a future when you lose a relationship, right? The possibility that you two to be together and grow something together, like a family or other, home life. Yeah. But you do take like this huge hit to your self-esteem and prospects in the future. And a rebound might just kind of give you this boost of like, okay, maybe this next person isn't the one, so to speak, but hey, I actually can date. I'm actually attractive. There might be someone out there for me, to get that hope back.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing that can happen, especially in like a bad relationship that ends, is your self-esteem could have been hit by things that your previous partner was telling you over and over again. They could have been attacking your character. They could have just been repeatedly disrespecting you. And if you have a long period of being single after that, I'm not saying that's a bad idea. It's probably a great idea for some people, but it can maybe stretch out the period of time when you believe those things. Yeah. Versus finding a new person who treats you in a radically different way. This is honestly what helped me a lot, was realizing like, you know, my last partner was telling me that I was never going to be successful in a future relationship and that he was the only one who could deal with me and my problems. And part of me wondered if that was true. And then immediately meeting men who they're like, oh, these aren't problems, or I can handle this. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. I felt the same way, where it's especially if all of us have, you know, baggage, relationship issues, right? Things that they bring into relationships that, you know, are kind of detrimental, right? And for me, if something isn't going right, I really dig in and try to fix it in a way that's probably like doesn't really encourage other people to like step up. And then I get even more upset and frustrated about that. I really blame myself for my divorce because I thought, in many ways, I blame him for a lot of things, but I thought, okay, me being that kind of like fixer, overachiever, maybe like devalued his contributions or something like that. And I was really worried. First of all, also like I was, you know, in my 30s too. So you're like, oh, not only do I have these issues that are ruining relationships, as I thought back then, but I'm too old. So like, who am I going to find that's not going to be a problem and I actually can move forward? And so I was really terrified. And relationships after really helped me see that was like, you know, those tendencies I have can be like good and well received by the next partner. So it really was like a healing process for me to have those rebounds.
100%. I mean, I feel like, so my last relationship was my first truly serious. I had other boyfriends in the past. But there were so many things that he made me believe were like totally abnormal and I would never find in a future partner. And when I instantly met somebody else who was comfortable talking about our dating histories, comfortable with me being independent, comfortable about talking about sex, you know, like with other people, I was like, oh, that's right. Like, this is the kind of person I always used to meet, and they are still around, and it's okay. And I think, you know, I was also really afraid to date in my 30s. I shouldn't say really afraid, but I was a little bit afraid to date in my 30s because, I had heard all these things like, oh, women in their 30s just want to settle down really fast, and it freaks men out. Well, what I found instead was that I met men who also want to settle down. And being really clear about what I wanted was just sort of an easy way to meet the people who wanted the same things. And so all of these fears I had, like, at first kind of fell away. And then I had a bit of a heartbreak with my first rebound, and all of those fears came back. So I also want to talk about, like, the part of the rebound that can be really rough. But but first, I think... there's a couple other reasons why people seek rebounds. So one is to fill a hole left by the previous partner that's either emotional or instrumental in nature. So emotional, like, I mean, one of the hardest things for me when I went through my breakup was having somebody to talk to all day, every day about even stupid little things, you know? And I actually remember that with a previous boyfriend. I remember teaching myself how to play memory in Cats on the piano because I was like, I have so much time all of a sudden that I need to fill, and I had to distract myself. And that was how it felt this way too, except I don't have a piano around. So as soon as I kind of met somebody who wanted to text me all day, every day, I was like, oh, that emotional need is filled. This feels so good. And I was a little bit worried about being over-reliant on that, or, you know, feeling like, okay, I'm just rushing into something because there's this huge hole left behind, and I'm just trying to fill it with whoever's willing to fill it.
Yeah.
It sounds sexual.
Literally and figuratively. I definitely relate to that. That I don't think no, that's not true. I actually did seek out someone to fill my holes. But for me, when I separated from my husband, it was COVID winter, and I was living in New York and in my one-bedroom apartment. And when I broke up with him, I was just alone for months in my apartment in winter at a time where no one was socializing. So I remember spending weeks by myself. And so, you know, I also just like love sharing my life with people. I love having roommates. I love living with people, talking to people all day. So, you know, it just felt so lonely to like get dinner by myself again, going from like my Zoom therapy practice to like watching TV from one screen to the next. And I remember thinking like, okay, I want to date. I want to get out there. I at least want to make other friends to fill that void and to, actually watch a movie with someone. Right.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I mean, that's awful.
Yeah.
That's awful. I mean,
yeah, it was like
not even be able to use
cage
friends.
of horrors in my own mind. Be watching TV shows I've seen a million times. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we did talk about last episode, like, how can friends help their friends who are going through a major breakup? And I think one can kind of, see what gap was left behind by the previous partner and fill it. And for me, that was like, the friends that were able to just text me all the time was like so helpful to me, so that I wasn't just sort of sitting in silence and thinking. And I had that feeling of emotional intimacy. Nothing was like the rebound, though. Like, rebound was the best. But sometimes also people look for instrumental gaps to fill. And this can be financial. And that might sound callous, but the reality is that some people are left in, like, really difficult situations when their relationship ends. Some people have kids that need a father. Or a mom
can't afford to live by themselves.
Can't afford, and that doesn't. I mean, some people may explicitly look for instrumental support. Other people might. That's just kind of what they're suddenly drawn to because it's such a prevalent need. Mm-hmm. So another reason people may find rebounds is it actually shows that rebounds help increase self-concept clarity and self-confidence. So this is really interesting. What they found is that in the wake of a big breakup, people can have feelings of, who am I? And that makes some sense when you think about, okay, when they were single for a long time, they had a single identity. They knew who they were. They lived according to kind of their own needs and values. And they get into a relationship and they become a dyad. And those needs and values change. They become really dependent on the partner. Their partner may be saying all sorts of things to them that are both good and bad. They might be really bolstering their character in certain ways. And then when that partner is no longer there, it's like, well, are these things even true about me? Like, who is there to reinforce these things? Or they could be saying really shitty things. And they could be tearing down that person's character. And so when that person is suddenly gone, there's this huge confusion about, like, who am I? Because for the past few years, I've been defining myself by, I am in a relationship, and this is who I am in this relationship. Suddenly the other half of the dyad is gone. I don't really know what to do with myself now. And so there can be an urge to meet somebody new and kind of understand themselves in new ways. And I actually think that really worked for me because, my partner said really shitty things to me and did really shitty things to me. And I was confused about how much of it was true and how much I needed to take responsibility for. And I think, again, like, meeting a new person allowed me to not only just fill that gap, but to kind of get back in touch with myself and say, oh, that's right. Like, I'm not a bad person. This person doesn't think I'm a bad person. I'm getting all this competing evidence and I'm kind of reconfiguring who I used to be and getting confident about who I was. So we do see that clarity and confidence rises. And the other reason is revenge. My personal favorite.
Yeah, that's the kind of rebound where you really want to post it on all of your social media. Look at this hot person that I have.
Oh, yeah.
Hoping that your ex sees.
Yeah. And actually, surprisingly, I think this one is also more likely to be done by men. Research has shown that women are actually more frequently the initiators of breakups. And the men often don't see this coming. The reason might be because women have spent a lot of time sort of cogitating over their emotions and kind of, thinking about, how does this relationship affect me? What is the right thing to do here? Whereas men don't have those tools maybe as sharpened, and so they can easily become blindsided by the breakup. And
I don't know if this is part of research, but relationships are, we're investing more. If you think about evolutionary, that we are, we have a biological clock where, getting pregnant and having kids is a big investment on our end. We are going to be the ones who jump out of that investment, right? So, sorry to put that in those terms, but
no, there are theories. One theory I was reading about is that the way men are most likely to approach relationships is a kind of game playing approach. So they're more likely to be comfortable with having several partners, maybe not becoming as emotionally invested. And women actually have much more of a practical approach. So they are more likely to have checklists and say, I need this person to be financially stable because it's not me I'm just going to be providing for, it's all my kids.
Right.
And so they're going at it with a bit of a more maybe clear-eyed approach of like, these are the things I actually need. And men can actually kind of get into this situation where they're almost surprised by their own intensifying feelings because they go in kind of game playing and then all of a sudden they fall in love and they're like, wait a second, I didn't even see this coming. And then they get surprised again when there's a breakup, whereas the woman is like, okay, well, I chose this person for a reason. And now those reasons are going away. And so I'm going to think pretty practically about this breakup. And so when people are blindsided and really hurt, they're more likely to seek revenge.
Interesting.
Yeah, so maybe just think about if you have an ex that's a male and you see they went quickly into a rebound or maybe posting about it a bit, it could be for these reasons. It's not because they just got over you quickly or they don't care. I mean, maybe it is, but it also likely is not. Hopefully that brings some comfort.
Yeah, I think it's interesting reading and learning about all the different reasons why people get into a rebound relationship because because we could say that there are pros and cons to rebounds, and it helps to kind of reflect on why you're getting into it, right? And for loved ones, instead of a loved one jumping in and saying, you should or shouldn't, it's a little bit like, oh, what are you getting out of this? What is this doing for you? What do you need from this new person versus like, your previous one or, so just like taking that time to reflect on why we're getting into this new relationship can kind of help you either figure out like how to get the most out of it or to figure out if it's like the right move for you in that moment.
So pros and cons. So again, I mean, we're seeing actually heightened confidence as a huge pro. And it may facilitate kind of getting over the previous partner. Actually, we find that people who were previously kind of insecure in their attachment are more likely to go into rebounds, but that did not hold for current attachment style. So it could be that a secure individual was insecure in a past relationship, secure now. So it actually found that more secure individuals rebound, which isn't necessarily a pro, but it is kind of an indicative of it not being a bad thing.
Right.
Yeah, and it also kind of shows like, okay, if a secure person was insecure before, it might mean, well, they were in a bad relationship before.
Right.
But now they're kind of going back to their original attachment style, finding a new relationship, having that heightened self-confidence and self-concept clarity.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a huge pro. Seeking revenge on your ex is also a clear pro here. So I would definitely recommend that one. What are some cons?
Yeah, I think these are a lot of... The cons may be a little bit more obvious to anyone who's trying to tell their loved one to, like, take some time, be by yourself, work it out, because a lot of researchers will do say that rebounds can be negative or even destructive to future relationships because you're not really resolving the issues and emotional problems from your last relationship. I know this. I feel this anecdotally. I think in my life I'm a serial dater. I've gone from relationship like all my relationships have been technically rebounds because I get into them kind of quickly after my last one, and I don't think that means that any of the relationships I have are bad or not real or whatever. I feel like they all were real, even if they were soon after my last one. But I would say that I may have some feelings or anger or my own processes that I need to work through from the previous relationship that maybe I kind of distract myself from or maybe kind of work out a little bit inappropriately in my new one. Mm-hmm. So, for example, I often feel that the anger and sadness, even when I'm in a new relationship. Like, I get into the new relationship, and there's a honeymoon period, and I still kind of feel like some kind of wave of grief. Yeah. Whether it's I hear about the person, and I get really angry, or I think about them. And, I mean, even just after my divorce, like, I still have waves of anger. And it's happening while I'm in my new marriage. And I feel like that's really not fair to my new marriage. And luckily, my husband is really patient with that and, like allows me to kind of talk through that. But that's not really great. And it's taken me this long to kind of not, how do I say it? Like project my old problems into my new one. So if my current partner is acting a little bit like my previous one, I'm not like super, super angry. All right. But that can happen, right? Like you're looking for something, the hole to fill. You got this new relationship and it puts so much pressure on the rebound to like fix all of the problems from the last one, right?
Oh yeah. No, it's interesting. So I had a rebound like 6 weeks after, which is funny because that was the exact, time definition I saw in one of the papers. And it had all those positive effects initially. I was feeling great. I was feeling moved on. I was feeling really confident. I was really into this guy. And it was definitely a feeling of, oh, all these things I wanted, they're right here. All I had to do is end that toxic relationship and I am rewarded. But there were a couple issues. One was that it ended up not working out. And that kind of compounded the breakup distress because now my heart was kind of broken twice. And it also kind of reinforced a lot of fears around trust because this person had said a lot that felt like it was leading me on. And he had been, telling me that he was ready to settle down, super invested, that we were going to have a relationship, and then very, very quickly changed his mind, that it just kind of reinforced the fragility of all of this stuff. And I was in a really bad place. And to be honest, when we first conceptualized this episode, I thought I was going to be pretty pissed. I thought I was going to be like, men suck, and this is an episode about how dating is impossible and all this shit they do, and that's actually not the case because I met somebody else who's awesome. But yeah, at the time, it really affected my trust. And I think there's a couple of things that can happen. One is that you look to replace the closeness you felt in the previous relationship, and so the rebound can go at like the speed of light, And you can put a lot, like you were saying, a lot of pressure on that new relationship. But you can also kind of tend to dive in head first in it when maybe you're not ready to. And that means that you can hold that rebound relationship really close to you and put all of your hopes and dreams into it. And that could be on like week 3. It was for me. 3 weeks in, I was like, we're getting married and have kids. I mean, we're talking about the dogs we're going to get. We're sending Zillows to each other. You know what I mean? Yeah. And when it dissolved so quickly after that, it was like, holy shit, what can I trust? But maybe the answer was don't go so fast. And I think another thing is that I was still processing my breakup, but it was in a particular way. I was still in contact with him logistically because I was actually moving out. And so I had to be in contact. And there were still parts where he was like asking me to get back together. And that took such an emotional toll. It was impossible to hide from my rebound. And so I cried to him about Paul multiple times. And this was a 3-week relationship, and that kind of legitimately freaked him out. But the effect it had on me is, oh my God, I'm so close with this guy that he's not scared off by me crying about my ex. So, it's just, I think that's a little bit risky. Like
Yeah, and we could blame him for piecing out, or like it not working out as hoped. But on the other hand, like that's a lot to put on the relationship and him, right? That's a lot to put for him to be the redemption story, for our rebounds to be like, oh, thank goodness, the story of like this past relationship had to end for me to end up with this person, meant to be kind of thing. That's a lot to put on the new person, and it kind of lead that new person to not feel seen, right? You're like dating them for them, but also to fix this other man. And that's too much. Like, we even do this, you know, in psychology, if you think about like how we do this to, you know, we date and have relationships to work out our previous pain with our parents or childhood things and past things. That new person is going to feel helpless because they're like, I feel like you're reacting to something else that's not me. And you feel that, right? You feel when someone's reacting to you that's not just about the present moment. It can be hard for both people.
It's funny, when I finally got mad at him, I did not feel like I was reacting to Paul. I felt like I was reacting to every guy I had ever dated previously, because it was such a story. What really freaked me out, actually, was that, you know, at least with Paul, I felt like he wouldn't leave me and he wouldn't cheat on me. And when that ended and I met somebody who just dropped me so kind of cavalierly, it was like, oh yeah, this is why I should have been afraid of dating. I remember this. And the problem is that rebounds could be not great if we go into the rebound. I mean, we're not conscious of this, but we might have strategies and mate selection. Like, we might choose the same kind of people as the people that we just broke up with. Right? And or like we date in a really particular way. We look for certain kind of people. And make the same mistakes as we did before, right? And rebounds and breakup are a really big time for personal growth. But if you're not actually growing, it could feel like, oh, why bother dating? I've done this before. It hasn't worked out. And there's some truth to that because you're repeating past mistakes. Yeah, and actually, it's funny because sometimes that can be beneficial. Again, maybe with that self-concept clarity, if people find a new relationship that's very similar to the old, there can be a sense of continuity that is comforting. It's funny, when I ended things, so it had felt like Paul was very different from all my previous relationships, and when I ended things with Paul, I was like, you know what, I'm going to go back to doing what I was doing before. That worked better. And I did. And I mean, it was a blazing relationship that fizzled out super fast because he chose himself, you know? I
had I think I've talked about my crappy rebound relationship before on this podcast, but
but please tell us again, because this is the best story that's ever
oh my God,
been told.
So you know, I broke up with my ex because he stumbled in his medical career and wasn't finding his footing after that. Basically, it was like kind of unemployed and kind of like lost after that. And I had a COVID winter, sitting on the couch by myself for many moons, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna get out there. And I contacted an old college friend of mine who I found out was working in my same place of work, and we got together, and I was surprised to hear that he had similar aspects of my ex, but was like a better version. So he was also a doctor who stumbled and had issues in his residency program, also had addiction issues, also had like relationship issues in the past, but then seemed to have worked really hard on himself, went to therapy, went to AA, and did all these things to just grow from it. And so we're talking about that growth. And if there was something in it that felt so relieving, it was like, oh my God, if my ex only, it's all the things I wanted my ex to do, right? And we fell into a relationship super quickly. And I think that him being like the X 2.0 made me ignore a lot of the red flags in the past. And thank God I was actually seeing a therapist, because my tendency would have been to, you know, want a relationship so badly that I was willing to fix things or overcompensate when they were kind of slacking off. But my therapist was like, don't do that. So I was a little bit harder on him. And then one day, and I was a little bit more firm with my boundaries. And one day, found a text from his ex on his phone asking, how long are you going to be there? While he was like hanging out with me. And I was like, what is this? And he said, and he looked shocked and looked embarrassed, and he was like, my ex just contacted me. She's pregnant with my kid. And I think this is made up, but like the timeline made sense. It was like they had apparently hooked up before we started dating. She just told him. I think they were dating the entire time, honestly, yes. But like, because there were signs of that when I look back. But suddenly he was like, I got her pregnant. I don't know what to do, but I want to be with you. I'm going to try to figure this out. And I was like, I'm absolutely not going to get into this messy relationship. You're going to figure this out. If you want to be with me, we'll talk about that at a later time. I'd like to be with you, but this is... You figure this out. So he was like, yeah, I will, but I really want to be with you. So he, after this kind of emotional conversation, he goes, okay, I'm going to see a friend of mine, have dinner with him and kind of talk through and try to figure out what to do with this issue. And after that, I'll give you a call. I'm so sorry about all this. So he leaves to go to this so-called dinner with a friend. And then I don't hear from him for days. He blocks my text messages. He doesn't answer my calls. And I'm actually kind of afraid that something bad happened to him, right? Or hurt himself or something. So I reached out to that friend he was supposed to see. And I said, hey, did you see him for dinner? Is he okay? And the friend said, oh, I'm really sorry to say this, Kibby, but I haven't spoken to him in years. He's a known pathological liar. And I've severed my relationship with him, and that was probably a lie that he said he's going to see me. I was just completely blown, and so as you said, I had the double heartbreak of feeling kind of swindled by my ex, and then swindled by this new guy, and I was even more devastated than I was after my separation. Yeah. So. Don't do what I did, folks, and, keep your eyes out for the red flags that are in the current rebound, if you're in one. Yeah, I mean, and maybe... I think it's maybe important to, maybe instead of not getting into a new relationship, maybe just try to do things a little bit differently, or maybe examine what you did in the past and not do that. I mean, so one of the kind of breakthroughs I had with my therapist was... We were talking about how I date, and he's like, it sounds like you basically look for a resume. So, okay, again, here are we with this checklist. You look for a resume, and then you spend all your time trying to get them to commit, and you don't take a second to assess them until you get that commitment, because that's when you relax. And then you assess them, and then you're like, wait a minute, this isn't up to snuff. And then you freak out, feel incredibly guilty, and everything. And that was an unusual kind of spin on what I was calling narcissistic idealization, devaluation, which was maybe part of it too. But I think, with this person who I actually, I think basically I saw, he had all these things that I wanted. He made me feel safe to be myself, which was the different thing I was looking for this time. It was that was what I was most kind of pulled towards. But I just dove in and was so sure so soon, and he wound up, I'll just share this because I think it's kind of in retrospect absolutely hilarious. He was basically like, I'm ready to settle down, I want kids, I'm going to prioritize you. I do have to go to the other side of the earth though for a bit because I already had these tickets booked, but I'm going to come back in a couple months. We're going to basically do long distance. I'm going to come back. It'll be great. And then he gets there and communication drops off. And he eventually breaks up with me, telling me that it's always been his dream to be a digital nomad. I was like, well, if I had to think of something that's the exact opposite of being ready to settle down, it would be digital nomad. Yeah, and I remember it was a couple weeks ago. But I remember seeing when you were kind of relaying those conversations with him, I remember, as your loved one, I remember seeing that you were acting in ways that are not typical for you in a relationship. You were, if he wasn't responding, you get really anxious, and you were acting like someone who was anxiously attached. You were, seeking out a clear answer from him about commitment, or where he was with that, and
whether he was going to come back. Like
yeah, I mean, it was like kind of a very uncertain, kind of scary situation, but you reacted to it in ways that I'm not used to seeing you. You seemed very, very like anxious about it and like ruminating and like seeking for him to give you something. And I remember thinking, you know, I think that you are looking for, you know, some kind of like security. It was more about the breakup than it was about this guy, because if you had just dated this guy maybe months after, or when you felt more resolved in your relationship, you might have been like, this guy is not responding. This guy's a jerk, right? He's flaky. I don't know. I don't want him. Yeah. I'll date someone else, right? But you were so like anxious about him because what I would guess is like that he would have been the redemption story. He would have been the thing that gave you like the positive outcome of what was a painful breakup for you.
And yeah, I mean, hearing from my previous partner, like, you're never going to find anybody. You're never going to, no one's ever going to love you like I did. Like, you have too many problems for anybody to love you. It was really gratifying being with someone who was like, no, I see you and I'm really into you and we're going to talk about the future and do all these things. And then I think to be so easily discarded and felt like I was kind of lied to. I don't think he was lying. I just think he was kind of reckless. That was tough. So I think we can also talk about, you know, there's how can we help our friends who have just gone through a breakup with regards to this topic? But I also think there's maybe some room to talk about, like, if maybe you're dating somebody who just got out of a breakup and how could you treat them? You know? And one thing I would say is just maybe be extra considerate. Like, I've been reckless in relationships, of course, and so I get that he was too, and that's just what was going on, and he got swept up and then realized once he had, you know, 1,000,000 miles of distance that, okay, actually he wants to focus on himself right now. Like, I get that, but this person has just been kind of pulverized in their life, and you might need to not date recklessly. You might have to be, like, really thoughtful about it and be good at communicating. And I think, you know, to anybody dating, I would say the most hurtful part was this sense of invalidation. If he had said, hey, I get that I said a lot of things and then we made a lot of plans and I'm now doing something different. I'm going back on them. I get that's really confusing and hurtful and I'm really sorry about that. You know, I didn't see this coming and I wish things had panned out differently, but I understand why you're hurt. I think that would have gone a long way instead of kind of being defensive and pulling away and being confused about why I was hurt. So I think that when somebody's come out of like a really serious relationship, they are kind of wounded and they might have some trust issues, and just like being able to be validating and communicative is really important. And yeah, and positioning yourself as kind of a safe landing spot. Like,
yeah, yes and no. I was thinking about something that my husband now did really well. Was he has been just, you know, unbelievably generous with listening and being a safe landing, emotional landing spot for me in the wake of my divorce, listening to me when I'm frustrated or whatever. But he did at some point say, like, he was honest when he felt like my feelings about the past relationship were encroaching upon the current one. Like, he at one point he did say, I don't know how to respond to this right now, because on the one hand I want to support you, on the other hand, hearing you still angry about your ex makes me feel like kind of sad because you're still thinking about your ex, right? So I think that was really great to draw some boundaries and be like, hey, you know, I think you're working something out in your previous relationship. Maybe I'm not the place to do that right now. Kindly, right?
And that also, I think, illustrates how I am different from your ex. It's maybe not appropriate for you to put this on me because I'm different from your ex. And that can help actually delineate the two. And that can be helpful for the person who's just gone through the breakup.
Yeah, that's the thing about all sorts of projection, whether it's like you're in this relationship working out feelings about your father, mother, ex, whatever. It's such a narrowing process where you're just only seeing the things that are similar and you're completely ignoring all the ways that they're different, or ignoring that this is a different person with some similarities, but this is an individual in front of you who's like has a right to be different than your past.
So I think setting appropriate boundaries, helping the person understand that you are different than the ex and that there might be some projection going on and not being afraid to say that. But also maybe being kind of extra considerate about what you are communicating to the person and knowing that you might be sucked in really fast to a new relationship, and that might be because you're a rebound. And being able to maybe say like, maybe we should cool it, maybe we should put the brakes on, like maybe I'm feeling like we're both swept up in this huge gust of wind that feels really good, but I'm a little bit concerned about it. So not treating the person with kid gloves, but just treating them with like respect and communication. Okay, so we started out talking about why rebounds are great, and then we started talking about why rebounds are bad. Let's go back to the happy ending here, because now both of us are very happily rebounded.
Yeah, and there's a lot of research show that there are a lot of benefits to rebounds, but also I saw in the literature that just because you're in a new relationship that might be a rebound, something that's close to a previous breakup, it doesn't actually have any impact on the length of the new one. So even if you get into a rebound relationship, that means that it could go really well and could last a long time. Yeah.
I even noticed for myself, and we were different serial daters. I was a serial dater. You were a serial monogamous, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You were monogamous too, but you were dating.
Yeah, I wouldn't become exclusive. Yeah.
I see.
But I think, people would ask me like, are you ready to date now? Since you've just been through this. And I would say I actually feel more ready for a relationship than I ever did before. Yeah. Because I got over my issues and I realized I actually like relationships. I can feel safe here. I can feel safe within commitment. And so I actually have really enjoyed dating post-Paul because I'm getting reacquainted with the things that I found important, the things that made me feel safe and comfortable. And I'm actually finding that. And I'm finding partners who want the same thing. And I tried to be kind of cognizant about not repeating my same patterns. So I will say I have a boyfriend now. We DTR'd literally 2 days ago.
Yay!
Yay! And it was just a very different experience. I would also say that we went in really fast. Our second date was taking a weekend trip to the beach. Oops. But there was a lot of talk about, when he asked me, I was like, I'm a little bit worried about the speed, but yeah, I definitely want to go because that sounds really fun and I want to spend time with you. And he basically made it clear that he was open to commitment and that he was going to be ready when I was, but to take my time and to just kind of like let him know. And I just felt like the communication was really strong. And I felt like I decided to look for different things this time around. I've always looked for people who are extraordinary in some way, but I don't think I had ever looked for people who had extraordinary character. And that's what I feel like he has. And so that has just made a big difference. I'm like, I feel like this dude is really good father material, and want to know why? Because he's demonstrated his success. He has like a unreasonably sweet 14-year-old son. Like 14-year-olds are supposed to be pieces of shit like I was. This kid is way too nice. Just treats me really well, is like really patient, really generous with his energy. And some of those things are reminiscent of my last relationship, but with the added feeling of I can talk to him about anything. He's not afraid of hearing anything. There's very clear self-confidence here. He feels very secure. And that just all is a different package than I think what I was looking for before.
So how did you do that? How did you, I think we're getting to is that we need to break our old unhealthy relationship patterns when we do rebounds. But how did you do it? Did you do that consciously? Did you just end up in this and then realize it was different?
I'm trying to figure it out. I mean, right at the time when I met him, I had that conversation with my therapist about kind of my usual tactic. And so I think with him, I was communicating that. And I think I literally told him, like, this is the thing I usually do. I want to make sure I don't do that this time. And so he was like, yeah, go ahead and assess me. Like take your time. And so I didn't feel like I was constantly pulling for him. I also think in the past I would go for high risk targets, like a professor at Duke or the CEO of the company where I first interned, and that was a bit of that put me in a hunting position, and I really enjoyed that because it was like sport for me. And I think with this, it was just a bit more natural and mutual, where I didn't feel like I was trying to trick him into being with me. It felt I actually felt more pursued by him probably, and that kind of gave me the time and space to choose.
Yeah, and it's also like the way we dated in our 20s, there's natural, like over time when we're ready to like settle down and start a family, there's natural changes, but also it sounds like working with a therapist and kind of being more honest with yourself about the things that you would do to kind of land you in more difficult relationships. I mean, it's funny because I bet my husband's going to listen, so this is to you, Alex, but he always jokes that he is like, I'm a rebound for you, right? And it like technically he was. I dated him very soon after I got divorced. So I can't really argue with the actual definition, but I could see that I was approaching it very differently than the previous rebound I talked about, because I was looking for, I'm looking to fill a hole. I'm looking to start a family, right? So that was very practical there. But I think I had worked with my therapist on the issue that something that got me locked into certain relationships was the feeling that someone was never going to leave me, that they were very devoted to me and they were never going to leave me. Often that came with a feeling of like power and difference, or like dating someone, I don't want to say like who's not equal to me, but had like more issues than I did, and I was fixing them and helping them. But it felt like they weren't going to leave me also because they needed me. And I didn't want that, but I kept ending up in those kind of relationships. And my rebound wasn't any different. Like, he kind of acted like he got everything under control, but he was a mess. Yeah. Whereas when I worked through this and really like became more aware of this pattern, I talked to my therapist about finding someone who, like might be more my equal, but might actually leave me. Like someone who wants to be with me and just because, it was hard to kind of work through my own like sense of self-worth. Like, can someone stay with me without needing me to fix them? But I, like magic, around that time when I kind of working through those issues, I started dating Alex, and we really quickly decided to, take it all the way. Yeah. And this is someone who I know is like very devoted to me because we had a long friendship, but also was like, we have mutual respect for each other. Yeah. So like breaking the old bad patterns is like really necessary to make the rebounds like more successful, I would say. Yeah,
I think I was always looking for passion and intensity, which I think led me to choose people where there was like a superficial element that created the passion. So for instance, maybe they lived in Hawaii and we just met at a wedding in Brazil, and oh my God, how intense is that? Or maybe they told me that they would absolutely just die and they would have no reason for living if I weren't in their life anymore. Guess who? Or maybe they were married, maybe they were my boss, all these things. And I think there was an element of like, this is passionate, and also there's enough distance between us to where this can fall apart. Because I think I always kind of wanted them to, well, not always, but I oftentimes wanted them to fall apart. I wanted there to be a risk because that would keep me invested and interested. And this time I've gone for somebody who literally is a single dad, doesn't, there's his wife died, so there's no shared custody or anything like that. Like, lives here, chooses his son every day, chooses another person every day, has his business here. It's like, this person's not leaving. And also, he would be completely fine if we broke up. Like, I'm not kidding myself, and I think that actually opened the door for security and comfort, but also like more kind of elation of like a natural sort. It's like not so manufactured, I guess.
Right. The passion from the risk of someone leaving you, but more passion because you have chemistry. Right.
And so now I'm just kind of like, do I feel extremely happy every time I'm with him? Yes. Do I not want to go to bed because I want to keep hanging out? Yes. All right, let's keep doing more of that, you know? Mm-hmm. Instead of like playing some crazy game of when will I see my Hawaii boyfriend again? Or yeah. Is this guy going to go to Bali and then want to be a digital nomad before he's ready for me? You know? It's just like ridiculousness. So, Jason, I know you're listening. I hope that was... I hope you're feeling good.
All right. So I guess to summarize, I mean, there are all sorts of reasons why we get into rebound relationships. There are all sorts of types of rebound relationships, and there are some good things and bad things, right? So it's like it's broad scope. But I think what we're saying is the tip for the person rebounding and the loved ones of those rebounding, kind of explore why you're getting into this kind of rebound relationship. What is it doing for you? What is it serving? What are you looking for? What are you afraid to lose if you don't have it? Right? And not just jumping into like, I should rebound or I shouldn't rebound. That's just really cutting everything into like really simple terms of like, there's one way to cope with a heartbreak. Yeah. But like, and then take a hard look at yourself. Use therapy, use your friends, and be like, what am I doing? What are my negative patterns? Like, what am I doing to keep myself stuck in my romantic relationships? And your friends are the best ones to ask, right? Because you have done that all the time, right? We call each other out on things that we've done with our partners, and really listen to those people and be like, how do I change that? How do I stop doing that?
Yeah. Okay, the final thing I'll say is that when Paul and I broke up, people gave me 3 sets of advice. They were like, get back out there. They'd get all excited when I was on the dating apps, but then they'd be like, wait, why are you dating? This is way too soon. Mm-hmm. And they'd be like, you need to process this breakup before you're ready for a new one. And that was a completely confusing set of instructions. They wanted me to date, didn't want me to date, and then I needed to process. The thing about processing is, what is the operational definition of processing a breakup? Yeah. I think what I would challenge friends to think about is that you can process a breakup with a rebound. You can process it as you're dating somebody else. That is a completely legitimate way to do it. And as we've seen, it literally has all these positive effects. And a rebound is not any likelier to end because it's a rebound than any other relationship. So you can continue doing work in the context of a new relationship. Sometimes processing the breakup means realizing that there are very different people out there and that there's hope out there. And that's totally legitimate too. So I would just say lay off the judgment. Yeah.
And also, as we say process, this is at least in thinking like a therapist, this is how I would say process. Feel your feelings from the past breakup. Mm-hmm. Understand your contributions. Understand his or her contributions to the relationship dynamics, and think about how if you need to change anything in order to move towards your relationship goals. I think those are the ways I would process a previous breakup. So
but there's
that's
no timeline on that. I mean, and it's difficult to know what the steps to that are. But I actually like that because I found it completely confusing. I was like, what do you mean process? And what is that?
Just like stare out the window and write in your journal. Like, what is that?
Okay, guys. Well, if you have been listening to other podcasts during this break and you want to break up with them and rebound with us, please consider rating, reviewing, and subscribing. Those help us a lot, and we love to hear from you guys. And go out and date and have fun because rebounds are great. Okay.
Yeah, and if for resources, we really like this research article that both of us read and referenced a lot in this episode. It's called Too Fast, Too Soon, An Empirical Investigation into Rebound Relationships by Brumbaugh and Fraley in 2015. So we'll post that on the website. It's kind of a cool read.
It was really cool. It didn't feel like reading a scientific article. I was like copying and pasting so many things to you. All right, little helpers, we'll see you next week. By accessing this podcast, I acknowledge that the hosts of this podcast make no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast and any and all content or services available on or through this podcast are provided for general, non-commercial informational purposes only and do not constitute the practice of medical or any other professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment, and should not be considered or used as a substitute for the independent professional judgment, advice, diagnosis, or treatment of a duly licensed and qualified healthcare provider. In case of a medical emergency, you should immediately call 911. The hosts do not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement.